All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today at Pipeline Summit 2025 Planning. To kick off the program today, I'm so excited to welcome Carrie Lou Dietrich. She's an incredible marketing leader with a ton of knowledge. Carrie Lou was formerly the CMO that took Atlassian public, and now she advises CEOs and CMOs at some of the leading B2B brands around the world, like 1Password, Segment, Bill.com, and more. So, Carrie Lou, welcome to Pipeline Summit.
Thanks. So happy to be here.
So today we're going to be talking about how to get alignment with your CEO. So how to align CMOs and CEOs on the 2025 marketing plan and strategy. And so, Carrie Lou, you're in a super unique role. Can you tell me about this role where you advise CEOs and CMOs kind of simultaneously? Like, what's the day-to-day like for you in this role?
I started out advising CMOs, trying to help them be more successful, but I quickly realized that a lot of problems that show up in marketing aren't necessarily marketing specific problems. They're business strategy problems that show up because marketing is where the strategy hits the market. Generally, I'll meet with a CEO every 2 to 3 weeks and talk about the strategy, overall company milestones coming up, challenges they're having with marketing, and challenges marketing is having across the leadership team. And then I'll meet with the marketer every other week, and we'll manage what's within our control while lobbying for the other aspects that will make us more successful overall.
I think your experience in this area is so perfect for today's topic, because here we are at the end of 2024. We're doing our 2025 planning. And as a former CMO myself, I remember kind of when I was promoted through the ranks, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to put together my very first business plan, my marketing strategy. I have to communicate it to the CEO. So let's kind of take a step back and just let me get your opinion on, where do you start? Here we are at the tail end of 2024. Where do you start with your business plan?
Most marketers are already pretty deep in their business plan. So I think we started back in September when the C-suite was really looking ahead to the year ahead to try to figure out what the financial plan needed to be. So there's all sorts of things that can inform your plan. One is the existing momentum of the business, but one of the biggest, especially in the space I work, which is pre-public hypergrowth startups, the financial requirements of the next fundraising round or the IPO, or for some of my public clients, their expectations from the street for the year to come really shape the plan. So if you are private equity backed and there's a short timeline, you need to hit some significant milestones. If you're VC backed and you're looking for your next big milestone, you need to hit some specific growth metrics. And we've been in the middle of some real big transitions around growth and efficiency, but the overall strategy often gets driven first by the financial plan, and then the strategy for how you could bring that financial plan to life and what needs to be true to make that happen.
So many times I've met marketers over the years, and they're a little bit like scared of the financial plan. They might not be in the room with the CFO or the CEO and other executives when that financial plan and business plan for the company is being created. And so many marketers are like really comfortable in their own world. So as you think about taking that financial plan and wrapping a marketing strategy right behind it, what's the best format? So I was on your LinkedIn the other day. I saw you shared something called Annual Plan on a Page. And in the past, I've used slide decks, I've used spreadsheets, I've used Word docs. I kind of got them all together, but does it have to be super complicated? Where do you start? What sort of documentation do you use?
It's difficult being a marketer because we're not often trained in the financials of a business. And it's not until you get to the senior levels you realize how much that affects what you do. So it's really critical for marketers, if they're looking to become executives, to become deeper and deeper in the financial aspects beyond marketing that influence what happens to marketing. So some of those are the efficiency. How little money does the company need to spend to hit its growth goals? Another one of those is the conversion rates and the overall cost of acquisition. So marketers often report on the cost of acquisition just for the marketing components, but that's often just a third or a half of the overall cost of the business to win new revenue or to expand revenue, because you often have the marketing team and the sales team and sometimes the customer support team that are all going into those financials. So first off, I would recommend that marketers get really deep in the financial plan and understand the drivers and the assumptions that affect them. Specific to your question, there's multiple layers. I think some of the first layers of really being involved in the company strategy can include PowerPoint presentations. They can include the Amazon 2-pagers or 6-pagers where you go deep into a specific strategy, like how should we approach expanding globally? How should we approach adding an AI product really significantly? And so in the first strategy aspect, it's about offsites, preparation documents, and analysis. And then with any great planning, you've got to do bottoms up and tops down. So it might start with a financial plan. It might go on to a C-suite offsite where you talk about which big bets you're going to make. And then generally marketing teams right here in October or November are doing their offsites to take that strategy plan and say, how would marketing bring that to life? I'm actually back from Vienna late last night where I was doing an offsite, and we took the corporate OKRs, we created marketing OKRs, we created marketing campaigns and outcomes and metrics. And then we looked at the performance from this year to figure out if we could hit those performance and metrics and what budget or people or changes we need to make to bring that to life. And then after you do a lot of the deep dives, you need to keep assimilating back up. So the plan on the page isn't how you do the planning. The plan on the page, which is on my LinkedIn and came from an Uptempo and Inverta website, but originally from Serious Decisions and Forrester as well, is about articulating the outcome of all the detailed planning. And it includes talking about the corporate goals, the marketing metrics, the risks and dependencies, and then the budget, so that you can see all of those interactive pieces at a 10,000-foot level and understand the trade-offs you have to make some big bets.
I think it's always really important that you can take a comprehensive plan and you can distill it down and simplify it and even present it on a one-pager. I was taught the V2 Mom method, which is kind of a similar type of thing. So marketers can use a variety of formats. I think we're going to be including the one that you just spoke about to all of our viewers. But let's talk about confidence for a second. I think that when a CMO or a marketing VP is presenting their plan and aligning with their CEO, usually that comes with a big budget ask. It comes with headcount asks. What is something that you think is critically important to give your CEO confidence in your plan?
Building confidence happens all year long. So some of the most successful CMOs that have the smoothest planning are also some of the CMOs that have the best performance dashboards in Q1 and Q2 and Q3. If you really have your finger on the pulse of what's working and not working, and you are experimenting with hypotheses and reporting on how that's working, you go into planning in a much better spot than if you're recommending new, unproven investments that may or may not have the payoff. So I think first it's about getting your data in order and your strategy in order. I think a second thing is really about having a shared understanding with the executive team about how marketing works, for lack of a better way. A number of founders, first-time founders, have not been marketers. Board members, generally, I think it's something less than 7% or 4% of board members have ever been marketers. Investors, product people, CFOs, often they wish that they could say, if I give you $1 million, you could put it into this channel and it will directly turn into $2 million. And the challenge with marketing is that marketing is this, especially at enterprise, but even for SMB and mid-market, is a compilation of a lot of different experiences that a customer might have with your brand. So getting an alignment about how you need to spend on multiple different channels together to get an outcome of revenue is an important underpinning for then making a very specific recommendation. And then kind of third, I think, is to have really done your homework and come up with a recommendation with specific business outcomes, not just activities, and hypotheses for when you'll start to see if those are getting the traction that the company and the CEO need to show a return on investment, and then checking in on those. And so I think part of the plan is in doing your research and really having all the detail to understand how it works, synthesizing it into something that's consumable, and then having milestones that you're proving against to see if your recommendations are on track.
I think you're pretty spot on that there are so many startup founders, CEO, executives, board members that don't really know what goes on inside of the marketing organization. And of course, there's nothing they like less than when a marketing executive shows up with a slide deck without any data, right? So let's get into the data and the metrics. How do you use data and metrics to make a compelling case for the marketing plan? And what sort of visualizations do you find that are really helpful? Like, are there standard, dashboards? Are there standard like charts and graphs? Are there hard-hitting metrics that you can present to a CEO to say, this is the amount of money I spent, this was the outcome, and here's the data to prove it?
Mm-hmm. When I was young, I remember getting a plan and you just had to do the best you could with what you were given. Here's a budget, here's a goal that might be unrealistic, go figure it out. And then as I got more senior, I was able to use data to inform the plan. So there's this one planning session that I'm thinking of where the company was on a February 1st planning cycle, but we were hoping to have the financial plan finished before Christmas so that everyone could finalize their drill down activities. And there was a really big tops-down proposal that was made by the C-suite. And I was saying that I thought it was really unrealistic for the marketing team to hit that with the budget we had available. And even if we spent a lot more money, we would have to spend more marketing dollars to get the same amount of dollars as it increased because we were already maxing out kind of organic and lower cost channels. So if we spent more money at the top, we would get less the more we spent at the top. And some of the most important data for that conversation was the organic traffic by different channels. So we had, this was a B2C and B2B company. So we had monthly reporting that we've been doing at the organic inbound, direct, affiliate. We had all of these different channels and we could show across the span of a year, how are they trending? And if they trended at the same amount or slightly better, what would that provide for this year? And also we looked at the conversion rates from different channels through sales to actual revenue. And if we built the bottoms up and we built it really accurately, I could show that even if, I spent this or that, and we had it in a calculator so we could plug in more spend to show what revenue it would get out, there was still just a really big gap between the tops down and the bottoms up. And I think if I had come into the room without the data and said, this is too hard, we can't do it, they could have said, well, that's because you're not good enough, which could be true. But also, if they're realistic about the actual organic traffic, which for a lot of these hypergrowth companies should be 75, 80, 85% of their growth, you can't really spend enough to make up for the mass of organic traffic that drives hypergrowth. And so, again, I write a blog, carrylou.com. The number one most successful blog over the last 2 years has been one about B2B marketing budget benchmarks, which recommends a weekly marketing dashboard. And it recommends a weekly reporting cadence for a lot of important metrics. And a number of those feed into the financial plan and the recommendations. And then there's also kind of a click down below that, which I think is organic momentum and sales conversion rates, which really are the basis of the reality we should live in. Because the moment that the clock turns over to the new year, like, conversion rates don't magically change. Even making big changes have to come with a timeline of transition to those changes.
So much of what you're saying is relevant for a PLG software company. It's relevant for an organization with direct sales. Your blog, once again, is carrylou.com. And let me turn the questioning to something that obviously has been top of mind for every single marketing leader all year, and that is AI. So CMOs, how do they think about AI? 2024 was this big transitional year from people tinkering with things to actually using AI in production. I think a lot of marketing leaders are like, what do I do exactly? Is this like an SEO thing? Is it a website thing? Is it an SDR thing? Is it a content thing? So when you think about planning for 2025 and you're advising CMOs, do they need to explicitly call out AI investments in their strategies? And if they don't articulate their AI strategy to their CEO, how are they perceived?
There's two really important things for top marketing leaders in the AI space. One is how you position your own products in an AI world, and that is really paramount. So you're seeing some companies get dinged really hard in Gartner Magic Quadrants because their AI is pedestrian AI and not really transformational. You're seeing companies try to position themselves in a sea of AI everything where people are already being cynical about, is this really AI? Does it really make it better? Is this just lipstick on a SaaS pig that doesn't have as much growth and wants AI growth? So I think first and foremost, CMOs need to be informed evangelists of how AI helps their customers and their products be more innovative than anyone else's. And on the flip side of that
Versus positioning of your company.
Of your own company, yes. And then on the flip side of that is how are we CMOs using AI to make their teams more successful? So in a number of different AI research that I've seen recently, I was sharing one with you before this call from Databricks. I saw another one that's on my blog about how ChatGPT uses OpenAI uses ChatGPT themselves for marketing. Marketers are one of the top two business departments to have most adopted AI. And as you said, this year has been a lot about experimentation. But according to the metrics that I'm seeing, next year is really a higher production year. So Databricks suggests that up to 40% of the companies that they surveyed in this survey that came out today, marketers are using AI in production. And we're seeing a lot of that in the SDR function where you guys have huge traction. We're seeing some of that in translation. We're seeing a ton of it in content development, some image development with Canva and Adobe. So CMOs are absolutely trying to invest in governance. Can they be stewards of the content and data in this new world and make sure they don't do something that comes back to bite them? Education, how do they upskill their own teams since it's hard to hire AI people since the market has transitioned so quickly? And real economic benefit. Can they find use cases that return budget to the bottom line to be more effective?
I think if you can't articulate, if you're a CMO or marketing VP and you cannot articulate your AI strategy to your CEO, I think your job is at risk at this moment in time. So here we are at the 2025 planning cycle, and it's probably mission critical for every CMO. Like you said, first in your brand and positioning your company. What is your company narrative? And then what are you doing internally to run your organization? I think everybody is looking for efficiency. You know, marketing teams are the exec team and the CEO. The marketing team is the first finger they point at when they're like, oh, your team is too big and you're spending too much money. So thinking about your own organization, what you're going to do, I think we all need the use cases. So let me transition, Carrie Lou, since we have about 10 minutes left. Let me transition to those discussions with your CEO around your business plan. What's the right level of detail? I mean, your CEO doesn't have time to get into the weeds like you do with your entire marketing organization and review every line on every spreadsheet. So what's the right level of detail when you're seeking approval on your business plan for the next year to show that like you've done your homework, you've got kind of the meat behind this, but to make sure that you present a comprehensive plan? What is that like? What is that balance? I've always struggled with that.
Maybe one of the reasons you've struggled, and I have as well, is because a number of CEOs can go really high and really low. So I wrote this really controversial post. I didn't mean it to be controversial about too much detail makes you look junior. And it was a quote that Christine Heckert, who was the CMO of Cisco, shared with me once about how sometimes you're a really detail-oriented person and that's what makes you so successful. But when you become an executive, if you take everyone through every step and you show them the blizzard and not the beacon, it denigrates your strategic reputation. But that doesn't mean you don't know all the details. So I find that this plan on the page could be great because you could share, kind of conclusions of all the planning with the CEO to say, hey, here's how I'm thinking about marketing's big bets. Here's how they align to the corporate goals. Here's how much they'll cost and what the metrics are that I'll track. Here's a calendar timeline of how this will roll out across the year relative to the product roadmap or other big milestones. You could share all those. And then the CEO might want to go deeper and deeper and deeper in click-throughs of specific areas. And you have to be ready to go there and have well summarized, strong documents that are calculators, right? So this one client I had at one time, the vice president of demand generation only had sketchbooks where she'd kind of put some numbers together and they kind of added up, but you couldn't analyze them and you couldn't cross-reference them. And then she'd give you a conclusion and then you'd ask for more detail and you'd get in the spreadsheet and be like, oh my gosh, I don't trust anything you're doing. And it was somewhat unfair, but basically even your click down books sometimes have to be strong. And I'm a super budget nerd. I have this budget that I love, again, that I've blogged about, but like with the summary tab, and each tab has information that's trending. And so if you want to come and check my homework, I'm happy to get into it, but I don't puke my homework all over you. I start at a high level and then I let you guide to where you're most interested in understanding the detail and maybe providing some really helpful insight.
That is incredibly insightful. And I just want to reinforce that point, because I think if you show up with a ton of data, it kind of says, I'm going to be ready for any question, but I don't really understand the plan and I can't communicate very clearly that plan. I think your CEO loses confidence. In my former life as a CMO, I used to work for a very prominent CEO in our industry. And one tactic that he used was he would just start to, double click. He'd be like, tell me more about that. Tell me more about that. He effectively was drilling down into my plan. And he saw how far I could go just in that conversation. And if I gave him confidence that I could go deep in this area, it basically said, I can go deep in all these areas, right? So how would you advise CMOs when your CEO starts double clicking and double clicking and double clicking? How do you guide the conversation and shape that conversation the right way?
Yeah, you worked for Mark Benioff. I worked for Larry Ellison, and the Atlassian CEOs have never worked anywhere else. And they're very detail-oriented people. So look, I think that my job as a CMO is to bring to life the vision of the CEO. And often CEOs have more context than I might have. And even if I don't agree or I think that sometimes when we get into this feeling of defensiveness, like they don't trust me, your emotion clouds just being in a good dialogue. Like if we're, in the trenches together, looking at the battle plan and someone can make it better, that's great. I mean, it means that we have to really do our homework and that we have to understand things at many levels. And I do think this is one of the biggest challenges for marketers, CMOs in particular, because there's so much land to cover, right? You can't be the deepest expert in every job in your team as your team scales. You need really excellent people, but you also have to get deep enough and double click on their work to make sure that you can talk to it. And sometimes in these meetings with the CEOs, you can bring in your data person or your demand generation lead, but sometimes that also undermines whether or not you have mastery of what you're proposing.
Yeah. Well, let me wrap it up with this final question, Carolu. Since we all are trying our best this time of year to put together our plan, to present and articulate that strategy, to align it to the business, but not everything goes well. And both you and I have our battle scars from things that didn't go well. And, I remember some of them like it was yesterday. So for the audience, can you share an example of a CMO or, CEO strategic planning session that didn't go well? And what lessons can we all learn from that?
when I go back to the places where things went wrong in the past, I think it's where either I hadn't really done enough bottoms-up planning and I didn't really know and couldn't articulate whether or not we could do it, or I didn't have a shared understanding and hadn't really been able to connect to the CEO to have a really realistic expectation. And I think to some of those, maybe I just like signed up for too much because I was like, I don't know how we're going to get there, but maybe we will. And all these years later, really knowing out how to model what a real expectation. The CEO needs to give realistic expectations of revenue to investors and the street. And otherwise, the company will be punished severely. And so our job as CMOs is to get as realistic as possible of a recommendation and a forecast, and then work with the CEO to figure out how we go above and beyond to get to even greater heights.
And I think, we're talking about planning for the 2025 year right now. But as we started out and you said, a year is a really long time and you have to be constantly planning and changing your model. So while this might be a starting point for so many marketers out there, it's a never ending journey. So thank you so much, Carol, for being on the program today. I really appreciate this conversation. And I hope our audience got a lot from it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was really fun.